Walt, SpaceX is preparing to go to Mars, or as your shirt says, occupy Mars. The CEO of Ferrari says no autonomy for our customers, and Uber continues its eastern expansion into Europe. But let's start with the upcoming SpaceX IPO, because I know you haven't been calling me a lot lately because you've been working hard on it. What have you uncovered?
I'm learning all about orbital data centers and power and solar. And look, a big part of this is going to be terafab. It's hard to get enough compute these days. Google's making their own, Amazon's making their own, and SpaceX and Tesla together with Intel not only are going to design their own, but they want to build their own fab. They're going to compete with TSMC. So I don't know. It sounds like something for us to reduce our exposure to Taiwan. Maybe the government should help out here and chip in. What do you think? Chip in to build some fabs in the great state of Texas.
Well, the U.S. has been trying to build fabs, you know this, for almost a decade in the Phoenix region, Arizona. So anything we can do to onshore the manufacturing of chips and eliminate the Taiwan risk in the supply chain, I'm all for it.
Well, so am I. And, we'll see how this thing goes. I've been doing a lot of work. There's a lot of capital it's going to take to achieve this stuff. If anyone can do it, I think Elon's the right guy, but it could take a little time. But more on that later. Meanwhile, over at Tesla, they expanded the service area. It looks like, I was asking AI, I was asking Anthropic, they were telling me 250 square miles, and I don't think that's right. Looks to me more like about 100 square miles, so it looks still smaller than what Waymo is in Austin. What was your takeaway from the expansion of Tesla's service area, and unsupervised, so they claim, in Austin?
Well, unsupervised was let's say a fourth of that or a third of that. It was a small expansion. The unsupervised expansion it appeared based on the map that it was continuing down that HEB parking lot that you and I had the great Tesla Waymo race out of, and it looked like it was expanding that direction. Again, we don't have any real clear data on that. What we do have data from is the Texas Automated Vehicle database, where they're showing that more cars are coming online, but we don't have a clear sense of this is going. All we know based on X posts is service is not running 24/7 yet.
I mean, from my standpoint, first of all, I didn't even catch that. So it's, kind of, I think odd you wouldn't just go unsupervised for the larger area, especially since you have so few number of cars there anyway. Got to scale up, man. Got to get to the 100 cars. And the fact that, again, they're not expanding unsupervised to the same type of square mileage or even much larger, and not adding cars, just put a pin in it. Put a pin in them for a while until we see some progress on car expansion.
We need to see it, and there's been several posts on X coming out of Dallas that individuals for several days have been unable to get the vehicles. Here's the key thing to watch. The World Cup's going to Dallas. Will the Robotaxi be operating in Dallas when the World Cup's going on? There's something to watch.
Yeah, I doubt it. I don't think that's going to happen. The other thing that's in Austin is Waymo with Uber. And those two companies, to get a Waymo, you have to use your Uber app. And again, it's I'm sorry to bring this up week after week, but it's one of my favorite moments with you when we put our Inspector Clouseau hats on, when we found that Avomo depot, and you're like, we found you. Still amazing. Still think about that every time I see the word Avomo. I am a bit shocked to see the news this week that Uber is partnering again with Avomo. That's not the surprise. But that WeRide is, well, I guess that is potentially a surprise, that it is kind of expanding to these European markets.
I think you have FOMO. That's fear of missing out for those from Rio Lindo, okay? You have a fear of missing out that you don't have one of these inspector hats. And you got to get your own hat with your own tagline. I'll tell you something. Based on the cleanliness of the vehicles in Austin, I was shocked to see a Vomo come back into the picture. And I say that because Move.io, who Uber's an investor in and has a relationship with, their U.S. headquarters is in London. It's not hard to go across the channel into Europe. So I was shocked to see it.
Yeah, so I don't know. So I guess the other question I'd throw back at you is, like, you thought things were pretty bad with the Vomo. Doesn't this doesn't this indicate that maybe things aren't that bad at that company if they're signing new deals, in this case with WeRide?
I don't know. That's it's the cop out answer. I don't know. And all I'll point to is that Uber is an investor in Waymo, but I don't know.
The other kind of takeaway here is WeRide European market. Obviously, we really want WeRide to succeed outside of China into these European markets to kind of prove out their business model, hit those number of cars that they've identified that they need to get to positive EBITDA. So, good progress there in, getting some additional partners in Madrid and moving that progress forward.
Yeah, as part of the agreement, it's the fourth of the 15 cities that Uber and WeRide are going to deploy together. So they're continuing to make progress. I just keep going back to the political risk. Uber is helping to accelerate Chinese technology, and I think at some point a politician is going to wake up and ask a lot of questions. To me, it's just a growing risk.
I guess so. I'm moving more in if it doesn't happen now, camp, things that it's a reducing risk as we go forward. And to WeRide's credit, there's basically two companies that are really making tangible progress right now in the global economy world, and that is Waymo and WeRide. Others obviously are making progress, but for WeRide to execute on progress on an additional city with Uber, that's whatever clappy hat, I guess, for them, for WeRide.
I'll give WeRide credit. They are expanding, and they're frankly taking the expansion very serious. And you're right with Waymo. We had a report out of Australia this week that Waymo is trying to overturn the laws there to allow autonomous vehicles to work in Australia. So Waymo clearly has global ambitions. WeRide clearly has global ambitions. Perhaps you're going to have a global showdown between WeRide and Waymo. It's something to watch. Between the two W's, WW, which one is it going to be?
I mean, I think the one area that WeRide seems to be doing better on is identifying cars and manufacturing process to lower that overall price. I mean, I think that's still something that, you're dealing with Zeekr. It's a cheaper car. You're still doing upfitting. We're still waiting for Hyundai to kind of get kicked off, but you got to give the kind of nod at this point. Like Waymo's got that, is ahead in terms of number of cars, but at some point, cost and volume of those cars is going to be more relevant, and you can kind of see that building threat occurring at WeRide.
It's going to be interesting, but let's not forget a lot of the vehicles, I'm not saying all, a lot of the vehicles that WeRide has disclosed in their SEC filings are Chinese manufactured. So again, I'm still harping on that risk.
Well, that's a good segue, because I know you like to attack these Chinese vehicles. And you're famous on this podcast for saying it was an unforced error for Waymo to pick Zeekr, which is Geely, in this basically made to specification product. And yet I see some news this week. As of June 4th, Waymo registered 45 Zeekr Robotaxis with the Texas Automated Vehicle Portal. Am I misremembering, or weren't you on this podcast and said good luck launching those Zeekrs in Florida or Texas? Did you not say that?
I did say that, and I stand by that. And I asked the question of how long until Waymo gets a phone call from Governor Abbott? How long until Ken Paxton, who is the Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate from Texas, he gets on it? How long until sitting U.S. Senator Ted Cruz gets on this? I got news for you. Once a politician picks up on this, you're going to see a what storm of epic proportions is going to emerge. Chinese vehicles on the streets of Texas. Let's say that again. Chinese manufactured vehicles on the streets of Texas. That doesn't add up, Walt.
Okay, but didn't I see Chinese vehicles on the streets of Texas when they come across the border? Because I think they have the ability to drive across the border. I don't know if that was California, Arizona. I thought maybe Texas. So this wouldn't be a first. Obviously different rules in this situation. I don't know. I'm taking the other side of this. I think you're overreacting, and I don't think anything's going to come of it.
If you think I'm overreacting, look to the bill that is emerging in the U.S. Senate to ban Chinese vehicles in the United States. And I will have you add that is a Democrat-led bill, not a Republican-led bill. So this could potentially become a bipartisan. I know bipartisan is a dirty word, but potentially could become a bipartisan issue.
I'm skeptical. Bills come and go. There's something that they used for their constituencies. I'm taking the other side. Time will tell on who's right on this. But for our listeners out there, send me some pictures of Zeekrs in Texas so I can tweet at Grayson with a picture of a Zeekr in Texas saying, clearly not an unforced error if these things are rolling around Texas. And by the way, maybe they're going to come to your neighborhood next. Florida, here comes the Zeekrs.
No. What I'll do, and I will then tag Senator Cruz. I will tag Ken Paxton. I will tag Governor Abbott. And if you come here, I'll tag DeSantis. and then guess what? That's a pretty good political alliance.
Now, speaking of Florida, Waymo, they had already announced Tampa, but they're starting to add some infrastructure for Tampa. They signed a lease for a warehouse that's 100,000 square feet. I think it's close to the Tampa airport. Similar distance to, I think, when we looked at the Miami depot that was under construction. So what do you think? What are your thoughts there? And by the way, again, they have this depot. I don't know if they have many Jags left. It seems like this depot would be a good spot to start sending some of these Zeekrs to.
You just like putting salt in a wound. Ooh, let's put it in there. That's where you're going with that. 100,000 square feet is basically a Costco or a supersized Costco. In the article that came out in the Tampa Bay Business Journal, it clearly stated Jaguars. What vehicles will show up there, we don't know, and I'm not going to make a prediction there. Politics-wise, I will say that it'd be wise not to put a Chinese-made vehicle there. And it's right next to the airport. And so it's interesting. So the Waymo depot's up here, the airport's here, where the Buccaneers plays over here, George M. Steinbrenner Field, where the Yankees have spring training is there. Really strategic location. The big thing to watch, do those vehicles cross the causeway and go into St. Pete? That's something to watch as they expand.
This is going to be Waymo's third Florida market, Miami, Orlando being the other two. Does St. Pete count as a fourth? I mean, it's kind of like you said, across the causeway, and it's called like Tampa St. Pete, right? So would that count as a fourth market?
If you're from that region, oh boy, you better say it counts as a market. To the majority of the public, I just believe that Waymo will call it the Tampa Bay market, and they'll consider it one. But technically, it would be two if they did go across the causeway.
Well, I didn't mean to offend our listeners from Tampa St. Pete. I have spent many moments in Tampa. We used to, when I was a rower in college, we used to train in Tampa. So I spent many a winter break in Tampa. A place in Florida that I have not had such a good time would be Jacksonville, where the Eagles lost the Super Bowl to the Patriots, and Tom Brady led Patriots. What is the chance that Jacksonville is going to get a Waymo rollout?
I'm very sorry that everything for our listeners has to go back to your beloved Eagles. I'm very sorry for the individuals have to put up with that nonsense. With that aside, it could potentially be a good market. It is a fast growing market. You have a gentleman, Nat Ford, who runs the JTA, the Jacksonville Transportation Authority, a wonderful gentleman, by the way, that's very pro autonomy. I just don't think it's going to be for a while. I think you'll probably see the Fort Lauderdale market come online before you see Jacksonville.
All right, so we got some other Uber news, I guess. This is a Reuters headline with all caps, of course, coming across my Bloomberg, all caps and in red, that Uber is putting $500 million into Neuro. I'm like, wait a minute. I think we already knew this. There was the $100 million that was initial. There was the $300 million that came in as part of the Lucid deal. So either they're rounding up, and there's been a lot of rounding up this week. For example, I think David Risher was rounding up the cost of a Waymo at $200,000. That's a hell of a roundup. That is not what a Waymo costs. Not even close. But I digress. Again, this narrative of Uber investing and stuff, and I just want to clarify that, when Uber makes these investments, they're not just handing a blank check over to these companies. And again, this isn't news. Like we've written about this. It's around the 400 range. The amount of money is tied to milestones. You just don't hand it over. So, and the same is the case for Rivian and some of these other things. They're going to have to actually make progress to delivering autonomy in order to get this cash. And we obviously hope that these companies do that. But I think you should always consider that when you see these big headlines of these 500 million more spent by Uber.
And that goes into the one thing that you and I do really well, and I harp on. Details matter. When you actually read the content, it says based on milestone performance or language around that. Details matter. This headline-driven media nonsense is got to stop at the end of the day.
And again, like, I'm not even sure that this was new information. Did they put in an extra $100 million to get to the 400? Is my numbers wrong from and like, why is this new news? But whatever. But they did at the same time as they're putting money in, or maybe it isn't the same time because it's milestone driven. At the same time as people were talking about Uber spending more money, they don't talk about the fact that they were cashing out some money. And in this case, Uber sold an additional stake in Aurora, which is obviously autonomous trucking, led by Chris Urmson, who's one of the original constructors of what is now Waymo. Aurora would purchase what was Uber's autonomous group. This is the stuff that Travis Kalanick built up and ultimately got sold off when Dara was stripping the company of a lot of these autonomy assets. This is in addition to the $1 billion that they had previously sold. Now, Uber still has about $800 million left in Aurora, which I assume they're just going to sell now. Dara is already off the board of this company. Uber still has Uber Freight. What do you think? I mean, this is not new, right? They're just selling more of Aurora. I think when they sold the first chunk, we talked about it's likely that they'll just continue to sell it. But what does this say, I think, about Uber Freight, Grayson?
I believe, fundamentally, Uber Freight does not have the cachet it had in the market after the Transplace acquisition. Leo Ron, who built Uber Freight, resigned as CEO to join Wabi as COO. So to me, that was a sign. But the bigger sign is Amazon put out a blog post and a tweet, I'll have you know. Amazon is entering the freight business. Amazon is competing head to head right now with Uber Freight. And why is it important? Amazon has one of the most sophisticated, if not the most sophisticated freight networks in the world. And then if you want to put icing on the cake, FedEx Freight now was spun out of FedEx, now new publicly traded entity. The new CEO of FedEx Freight, John Smith, no relation to the late Fred Smith, came out and said autonomous trucks are ready for prime time. Again, another logistical powerhouse. So you have FedEx Freight and Amazon Freight that are going after Uber Freight. You've got an issue there.
So Amazon's a big company. It feels like I meet someone and they're like, I'm the head of autonomy, and then the other person's like, I'm the head of autonomy, and then it's like it's different sectors, like whether they're managing partnerships or the internal autonomy, whether it's like sidewalk autonomy or drone autonomy or trucking autonomy. My question that I'm getting to is this. They went out of their way to buy Zeekr when basically I think that company was in trouble. That company, that has not gone well, let's call it, right? Why is it that Amazon has not purchased a Zoox like in the trucking world? Like the synergies for what they're doing, and now that you're mentioning this freight side of things, why wouldn't they be? I mean, I know they've tried partnerships with a number of companies. I think they ran some trucks for Plus for a while. I think they've done maybe some stuff with Aurora, or at least talked to them. Like, why aren't they just owning this space? And is the reason perhaps that there's some internal development that we're going to find out about?
And let's not forget, way back in the day, they did a deal with Embark that was disclosed as part of Embark's SPAC process. If you read the original prospectus for Zoox and read the court case documents that were filed in the Delaware Chancery Court, it was made very clear that Zoox has no intentions, and they have to stay on the mission. They will not go into trucks, which always dumbfounded me. I said, okay, you get the stack, you can put it into sidewalk delivery bots, you can put it into trucks, you can morph it. And as you and I know, and through the communications, you never see Zoox, an Amazon company. It's something you want to be proud of. You've got this great balance sheet. As for why Amazon never acquired autonomous trucking company, never looked into it, I'm dumbfounded. I don't understand why. I can make a very rational argument that Amazon should have never bought Zoox and should have bought an autonomous trucking company because it fits into their operations. Why? That's the $1 million question. And because I'm getting good at this, to the folks at Amazon, please have Mr. Andy Jassy address autonomy on an earnings call and give us some color into the strategy there.
I mean, they could do this one of two ways. There's obviously still capital intensity, Whether you're someone like Aurora spending a lot, or even companies that are spending a little, like Kodiak, there's still capital intensity. There is, runway to a certain period of time. So there could be pressure on these companies where Amazon could come in right when they're at this inflection point of getting autonomy to work and make a really attractive acquisition. They similarly could provide additional capital that buys future freight miles, in exchange for, or takes a equity stake in these companies with a right for future purchase. As things kind of play out, as cash burn continues, as we're kind of in this transition point where these companies are hitting commercialization, right at a time when they need that kind of capital intensity to get to that next step in that sweet spot. I mean, it seems like a time when they and perhaps FedEx should lean in more aggressively, given their size. What are your probabilities on that speculation?
Give it a 50-50. And I know it's a cop-out answer, but I think about this. Does Amazon have battle scars from the Zoox acquisition that could potentially make them more hesitant to do a deal on the trucking side, do you think?
I don't, because I think they can see Waymos in the market operating quite well. So I don't think it's a autonomy issue. I think it's a Zoox issue.
I agree with that. In my opinion, Amazon, obviously they have the balance sheet to do it. They have the free cash flow to do it. They have the engineering. They have the compute access to do it. Perhaps it's an issue where they want to wait until there are companies operating driver out, no supervisor on multiple lanes, and then they go in there and scoop something up, and the technology is already more mature, perhaps. So I don't know. At some point, I see Amazon doing something. What they're going to do, I'm not going to make a prediction on that, but at some point they are going to do something. Because all you have to do is go look at Kiva Robotics for the warehouses. That worked out well for them. Why? I just don't understand why they haven't do it. But here's a hypothetical for you. Let's say FedEx Freight goes out and does a deal and acquires somebody. Do you think that potentially forces Amazon's hand to move faster?
I mean, certainly. Whenever there's action in a market, the knee-jerk reaction of management teams is to rush to their whiteboards and figure out what they need to do. Reactivity. You always need that first domino to drop in order to create others. So we'll see if that happens. And I think, look, as these guys progress forward and their needs for capital progress forward, I think those things will happen. I mean, the flip side of this argument is there's such a focus on compute. You've got companies, Google. Now there's news of Facebook wanting to issue equity in the market for the amount of capital required for compute. Like, even though these are small dollars relative to what they're spending on compute, maybe there's like some lockdown on CapEx and investments like this in other areas. You never know if that has some knock-on impact of that. So time will tell, but I just like to throw it out there so that at some point in the future, when it does happen, we can always refer back and say, you heard it here first on Autonomy Markets.
We should get the old Drudge Report siren going when we break something ahead of somebody.
I know others will deny that they heard it here first, but that's fine. We know that they heard it. Anyway, so let's go to the next story. Avride. We talked about this last week, about we were curious about the number of vehicles that they were claiming to have on the road. Not they were claiming, but Texas said they had on the road. We got some clarification. It's probably closer to 200 plus vehicles. They put a tweet out. Also talked about 60,000 autonomous rides on Uber. So someone went through the Uber app for 60,000 rides. That's very impressive in Dallas on Avride. I was one of those, many of those 60,000, as were you. We've shared our experiences in the past. If you haven't seen it, go to Rojo Autonomy, search up Avride. You'll see some of our comments on our test ride in Austin and our live rides in Dallas. But we were right, man. Like the three, whatever it was included other vehicles. It wasn't anything Avride was misrepresenting, but it's just how those numbers work in Texas, where they're counting all the cars next versus like the cars actually on the road for autonomy. An important point when people are out there, trying to splice and dice and splice data about our friends at Tesla. Remember that, some of the data, if you dig a little deeper and peel the onion a little bit, it might not necessarily support whatever thesis you're trying to push.
It goes back to something that I've been saying for probably going on a decade now, that a lot of these reports, and this goes back to the disengagement reports from California, create a false narrative and frankly, a misleading narrative. And that's what we're seeing in the Texas data. I would say to the state of Texas, the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles, please add some clarity or some notes around the data. Just don't put the number of vehicles and all the VIN numbers. Give some clarity, give some context to it, and help to eliminate this problem.
I agree. They do. Everyone's trying their best, but just remember when you get data, especially from states, you have to think about some of the quality and ask those additional questions versus jumping to conclusions that you think support your thesis. In any event, let's move on to Serve, another, I'm going to tout Road to Autonomy again. A company that has appeared on Road to Autonomy. So again, search the library for that. These guys are turning into a press release machine, Grayson. And in this case, now they're moving laundry. It's not just food. They're going to use these great robots that are on the sidewalk that in Philadelphia are not getting abused as people would have you think. But now they're going to be moving laundry for pickup and return. Seems like a great application.
It's a wonderful application. I will tease to the audience that Ali is coming back. He's the co-founder and CEO. He's coming back on in a few weeks. Look forward to that episode. So, Walt, the city of brotherly love is the city of brotherly autonomy. Like they're showing some love to the robots.
I'm just saying, I've seen robots there, and I didn't see anyone messing with them. So now, maybe if someone tries to crack in there looking for a cheesesteak, they're going to find someone's dirty laundry. That'll be a rude awakening. Especially Philly dirty laundry.
That's not good. And which is a rude awakening? The CEO of Ferrari comes out. He goes, "No, we're never going to build an autonomous vehicle." Well, get the tape, the ticker, and let's rewind back. When Sergio was alive, we will never, ever build an electric car. And lo and behold, they built an electric car to a lot of, I'll use the term fanfare, but he says the driver has to have the fun, not the computer. I'm going to file this under, this is another line of we won't do it, and they eventually will do it.
First of all, when you say fanfare, you just brush over the fact that Johnny Ive delivered the most generic-looking Ferrari ever known to man, where it was even ripped into by a former executive of Ferrari. So that was, you were being too kind there. I think on this autonomy, you don't buy a Ferrari to have it drive autonomously. You just don't. So the electric thing, I can see how they'd flip-flop on that. Not totally, because you'd still want the rumble of the engine. But it makes sense that no one, Ferraris will be the last car to go autonomous.
Nope. You're 100% wrong. You know why?
No, tell me why. I have no idea.
Ferrari is an aspirational brand. It is not a car. It is a brand. And that brand has value.
But if you're buying a Ferrari, you're buying it to drive it. I don't understand. Do you think someone would buy a Ferrari just to sit in there and have it drive you?
Yes, because you and I both know when you roll up in a Ferrari in certain locations, you're going to have a good evening. It's a pickup machine.
I understand that, but why do you need it to be driving autonomously, though? I mean, they are a difficult car to drive. I can see how you can crash those things quite easily. But beyond that, I don't know.
Do I have to jog your memory? We're a G-rated audience, so I'm not going there. The car autonomously drives yourself, and you kind of see where I'm going.
Oh, God. Okay, next. Foreign autonomy desk. What do we got? Jesus. Sorry, Mom.
I behaved for Mrs. Piecyk.
That was great. That was Grayson this time. I
behaved. I didn't say anything inappropriate. I said we're a G-rated show.
Oh, you're terrible. You are terrible. All right, what do we have on the foreign autonomy desk?
Ivan was terrible, not me. See, that's history lesson there for you. On the foreign autonomy desk, Uber continues, as we said earlier, their expansion into Europe. This time, they're partnering with Autobrains, an Israeli-based company. We've had the CEO on the Road to Autonomy podcast before. And pending regulatory approval, they'll be launching a Robotaxi service in Munich powered by Autobrains.
So Autobrains is basically just another autonomy company. And I must have missed that episode, so I will have to, once again, go back into that Road to Autonomy library, the deepest autonomy library in all of autonomy, to look for the Autobrains and learn about what this company does.
Thank you. And just to give the audience a quick thing, Autobrains, one of their investors is VinFast, the Vietnamese auto manufacturer, and they're building cars there for the Southeast market. So watch for that. Another thing to point out to the audience for Munich, Neuro is currently testing in Munich as well. So two Uber partners, one city. It'll be interesting to see how that works out.
What else do we have in the foreign desk?
In the foreign desk, the PIF, the Sovereign Wealth Fund for Saudi Arabia, has a company called Humain, and they announced a partnership with Nvidia where they're going to deploy Robotaxis in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
So Humain does what? Are they a tech company, a car company? What are they? Humain.
Humain is a AI startup. If you want to call it a frontier lab, and they're partnering with Nvidia to deploy them. And the question is, who's going to be the service provider? That's something to watch and see there. And not to keep going back to the library, Tuesday on Road to Autonomy, Mr. Gil West, CEO of Hertz, joins us, where he breaks down Hertz's global strategy for robotaxis. And I'll give you a hint. It's a lot bigger than you might think.
Can't wait. Looking forward to it. What do we have for next week?
That's your department. We got WWC, but what else is going on?
I mean, WWDC, clearly not going to say anything on cars. I'll be dealing with SpaceX as they approach the pricing of that deal. And you got some more investor conferences. So, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it'll be a quiet week for us. I doubt it.
Quiet week? We've said that before. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is a busy week.